I canceled our exclusive booking of the entire island resort for our wedding day. The hotel manager stared at me in surprise. You put down a $15,000 deposit. Don't you want to wait until the groom gets back and talk it over? I pushed the contract across the desk and gave him a faint smile. No. He's still away with the girl he grew up with, watching the bioluminescent waves. For all 6 years we had been together, Mason Reed had gone to the coast every summer. He always claimed it was a company retreat, but his Instagram inevitably featured a photo of the ocean in the middle of the night. Once I asked whether we could go there for our honeymoon someday. He frowned and said, "What's so special about the ocean? It's just water." It wasn't until 2 days ago, while helping him sort through an old hard drive, that I found a folder titled Tides. Over the course of 6 years, he had saved more than 300 photos. The same woman appeared in all of them, on the same stretch of beach, always in the hours before dawn. In one photo she stood barefoot in the surf and smiled back at the camera. The only trip Mason and I had ever taken together was to the next city to try on wedding dresses. He sat on the couch scrolling through his phone without even looking up. "They all look the same on you. Stop making such a big deal out of it." I believed him. The manager slid the refund paperwork toward me. "You want to cancel the bridal suite too? Didn't you already have the ceremony backdrop made?" I looked at the white draped backdrop bearing Mason's name and mine, and suddenly I could no longer force a smile. I had stayed up late creating 7 different versions of that design. He had never looked at a single one. I wiped away my tears. Cancel it all. I had already finalized my resignation as well. I erased every trace of myself from the city. The tide would never wait for me, so I was done waiting for it. "Emily, did you really cancel the private island wedding?" Chloe Bennett called just as I walked out of the hotel lobby. The wedding welcome sign was still standing by the entrance. It read, "Welcome to the wedding of Emily Carter and Mason Reed." I glanced at it but did not stop walking. "I canceled it. You put so much work into it. Can you really just walk away?" "Yes." "Does Mason know?" "He's out of town." Chloe was silent for 2 seconds. Grace again. "Yes." "Emily, are you sure about this? Aren't they just old friends who grew up together?" My hand tightened around my car keys. Would 2 people who were just friends take more than 300 photos at the same beach over 6 consecutive years? Chloe had no answer. I ended the call and opened Mason's Instagram. 3 minutes earlier he had posted a photo of the ocean at night, with pale blue light glowing along the edges of the waves. The caption read, "The bioluminescent waves are brighter this year than they were last year." I stared at the words and suddenly found them absurd. He had posted a similar photo around this time the year before. Excited, I had asked, "It's beautiful. Will you take me there someday?" He had replied, "It's packed with tourists. There's nothing special about it." But the photos on his old hard drive had not shown any crowds. Grace Foster stood at the water's edge in a white dress, bending down to scoop the glowing water into her hands. Mason had taken more than a dozen photos of her, and every one of them was beautiful. One of the photos even had a note saved with it. Grace said it looked like stars had fallen into the ocean. Mason and I had been together for 6 years. The most romantic thing he had ever said to me came on the day we applied for our marriage license. "It'll be nice having someone to share the day-to-day with." When I reached our apartment building, I stayed in the car and scrolled through the photos on my phone. There were 26 pictures of Mason and me. 15 had been taken when we first started dating, while the following 4 years had produced only 11. 3 of those were group photos from company events. Mason stood beside me looking as though someone had dragged him into the frame at the last minute. Grace, however, appeared in more than 300 photos. There were pictures of her standing on the rocks, sitting in the passenger seat with half a coconut in her hand, and closing her eyes as she listened to the wind off the ocean. Mason had carefully preserved every one of her summers. I had spent every one of mine waiting for him to come home. My phone rang again. This time it was a video call from Mason. I answered. He appeared on the screen wearing a floral shirt, his hair tousled by the wind. Behind him was a lively beachfront boardwalk lined with food stands. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "Yes. I'll be home in 2 days. Keep an eye on the wedding arrangements until then." "Okay." He glanced toward someone beside him and smiled. I rarely saw him look that relaxed. "Mason, the shrimp skewers are ready," a woman called from outside the frame. Mason turned toward her. "Coming." When he looked back at me, his tone was perfectly casual. "Grace is calling me over. I have to go." "What is she doing there?" "She's been having a hard time lately. I came along to help her clear her head." "Does she need you to help her clear her head every summer?" Mason frowned. Emily dropped the sarcasm. "Her father died when she was young, and summers are especially hard for her." I said nothing. My father had died in the summer too. Mason knew that. 3 years earlier, on the anniversary of my father's death, I had begged Mason to go back to my hometown with me to visit my father's grave. He said he could not get away from a project. Later, I saw a photo on Grace's Instagram of Mason holding an umbrella over her. The caption read, "I'm glad I have someone here to watch the ocean with me." Mason continued, "By the way, I bought you a seashell wind chime. Grace picked it out and said it would look good on our balcony." I stared at him on the screen, unable to make a sound. Even the smallest detail of my wedding had to be chosen for me by Grace. Before ending the call, Mason said, "Don't read into it. Wait until I get back." I stared at the dark screen and sent him a one-word reply. "Okay." Then I went upstairs and started packing. Mason came home a day earlier than expected. He dragged his suitcase through the door and kicked off his shoes. "I'm exhausted. I caught the first flight out this morning." I stayed on the living room couch without moving. He pulled a paper bag from his bag and tossed it onto the coffee table. "This is for you. It's a seashell wind chime." Then he carefully removed a long box from an inner compartment of his suitcase. It was tied with an elaborate satin bow. "Don't touch this one. It's for Grace." I glanced at it. "What is it?" "A handmade pearl hair clip. She needs it for a photo shoot next week." He said it as though there were nothing unusual about it at all. I opened the paper bag. Inside was a wind chime no bigger than my palm, with a $4.99 price tag still attached. One of the shells was cracked along the edge. I held it up. "This is what you bought me?" Mason frowned. "Don't you like little things like that?" Since when had I ever liked things like that? The year before, I had found a pair of pearl stud earrings I liked at the mall. They cost $60. Mason had said, "We have enough wedding expenses coming up. Don't waste money on something you don't need." So I left them behind. Grace's hair clip, on the other hand, came from a Japanese artisan brand and was listed for $450 on the brand's website. "Did she ask you to pick it up for her?" "No. I happened to see it and thought it would suit her." I nodded. "That was awfully convenient." He took off his jacket, completely missing the sarcasm. That evening his mother called. "Emily, have you finished the wedding seating chart?" "I haven't finished it yet." "Why are you paying so little attention to any of this?" "Grace came over last week and helped me look over the menu. She said a standard seafood dinner was too ordinary, and that younger guests would prefer food stations." My hand froze around the phone. "Grace wants to change the menu?" "She knows about these things. You've been so busy with work that I didn't want to bother you." "Mrs. Reed, this is Mason's and my wedding." Silence followed. When she spoke again, her voice had cooled. "I know that. Grace was only trying to help. You don't have to be so sensitive." Mason came out of the bathroom, rubbing his wet hair with a towel. "Who is it?" "Your mother." I put the call on speaker. Mrs. Reed continued, "There's something else." Grace said the wording on the ceremony backdrop sounded corny, so she wrote a new version. "I'm sending it to you now." My phone vibrated and an image appeared on the screen. My original line had read, "We fell in love in the ordinary moments of life." Grace had replaced it with, "Through every ebb and flow, I'm lucky to have you." Mason glanced down at the screen. Grace's version is better. It has more feeling. I looked at him. "Did you ever read the one I wrote?" "Of course." "What did you think?" He considered it for a moment. "It was fine." That was all it was to him, fine. I had stayed up late for 2 nights writing those words, and all he could say was that they were fine. Grace made one casual change and suddenly he thought her version had feeling. Mrs. Reed kept talking. "Emily, I'm only saying this for your own good. A woman about to get married should know how to handle these things and have some sense of style. You can be so rigid. You should take a few notes from Grace. I ended the call. Mason's expression darkened. Why did you hang up on my mother? I didn't want to listen to her tell me to be more like Grace. She can be blunt, but she means well. What about you? What about me? Mason, why is Grace involved in every part of our wedding? He raked a frustrated hand through his hair. She's just helping. You work late every day, so what's wrong with my mother asking her opinion? Did you ever ask whether I wanted her involved? Do I really need to ask you about every little thing? To him, they were all just little things. The wedding menu, the ceremony backdrop, and the bridal suite decor. Anything that was supposed to be mine was apparently fair game for Grace to take over, as long as it was convenient for Mason. He walked over to the coffee table and picked up the wind chime. Let's hang this on the balcony. Grace said it would sound nice when the sea breeze catches it. I stared at the chipped shell. We don't get sea breezes here. He froze for a moment. I put the wind chime back in the paper bag. So there's no point hanging it up. On Friday night, Mason's friends arranged a dinner at a seafood grill on the south side of town. I did not want to go, but Mason stood by the door rushing me. Everyone there is an old friend. Don't be a buzzkill. I changed my clothes and went with him. Grace was already in the private dining room when we arrived. She wore a pale blue spaghetti strap dress, with the pearl hair clip in her hair. The moment she saw Mason, she smiled and waved. Mason, over here. He went straight to her and sat down as though it were the most natural thing in the world. After standing there for 2 seconds, I took the seat on his other side. Tyler Grant raised his glass and called out, Well, look who's here, Sobriety. The wedding's coming up soon, right? Mason nodded. Yeah, it is. Grace rested her chin on her hand and smiled. The wedding hasn't happened yet. Anything could still change. The entire table fell silent. Tyler quickly tried to smooth things over. Grace has no filter. Don't take it personally. I did not take it personally. I simply stared at the hair clip in her hair. The pearls gleamed beneath the overhead lights. One of the women leaned closer to her. Grace, that hair clip is gorgeous. Who gave it to you? Grace glanced at Mason. An old friend gave it to me. Mason answered without the slightest hesitation. I gave it to her. Pearls suit her. The woman instinctively looked at me. Then Mason must have bought Emily something too, right? He waved a hand dismissively. She doesn't like that kind of thing. I smiled. When did I ever say that? Mason stared at me, caught off guard. Grace immediately linked her arm through mine. Emily, don't misunderstand. Mason's just clueless when it comes to romance. I'm sure he got you something more practical. Like what? She hesitated. I answered for her. For example, he got me a $4.99 seashell wind chime. No one at the table said a word. Mason's expression changed. Emily, did you really have to bring that up in front of everyone? Weren't you the one who told everyone I didn't like jewelry? Grace let out a quiet sigh. Emily, when you act like this, you make things so hard for Mason. She said it softly, but the words struck me like a slap. Apparently, Mason was the one being worn down. That meant I was not allowed to ask questions, get angry, or even admit that I was hurt. I went to the restroom to wash my hands, and Grace followed me inside. She stood in front of the mirror touching up her lipstick. Emily, you really don't have to treat me like an enemy. I turned off the faucet. I don't have the time or energy to make you my enemy. She smiled. Good. Mason and I have known each other for 20 years. I understand him better than anyone. He doesn't say much, but he's a softie underneath it all. So stop using the wedding to pressure him. He told me you've made everything so complicated that he feels like he can't breathe. My stomach dropped. He talks to you about that? We talk about everything. She capped her lipstick and turned toward me. Emily, I'm going to be honest with you. He chose to marry you because you're stable, sensible, and never ask anyone for much. She paused, the corner of her mouth lifting. But when Mason is with me, he gets to be himself. I stared at her, then suddenly laughed. Grace, do you hear how disgusting you sound? Her smile faded. I'm only warning you not to hold on too tightly. The more cornered a man feels, the more he wants to run. Do you have to hold on to him? No, I don't. She touched the pearl clip in her hair. He comes to me on his own. When I left the restroom, Mason was waiting outside. What took you so long? I was talking to Grace. His eyes immediately flicked toward the restroom door. She didn't say anything she shouldn't have, did she? What are you afraid she might say? Mason frowned. You've been looking for a fight all night. When it was time to leave, Grace said she had been drinking and could not drive. Mason automatically reached for his keys. I'll take you home. I stopped him. She lives on the north side. We live on the east side. How exactly is that on your way? It's late. She shouldn't go home alone. What about me? You're coming with us. Grace took the passenger seat while I sat in the back. She connected her phone to the car's Bluetooth with practiced ease and played a mellow folk song about the ocean. Mason, remember this song? We heard it outside the inn where we stayed last year. Mason smiled. You tried to sing along and missed every note. They spent the entire drive reminiscing about the beach, the inn, and the fish tacos from that boardwalk shack. From the back seat, I felt like a stranger catching a ride in someone else's car. When we pulled up outside Grace's building, she leaned down before closing the door and looked at me. See you at the wedding, Emily. Then she turned to Mason. Don't forget about my beach photo shoot next Saturday. I remember, Mason said. The door closed behind her. I looked at him. Do you remember what next Saturday is? He thought for a moment. It's Saturday, isn't it? It's the anniversary of my father's death. The car went completely silent. 3 years earlier, Mason had not gone with me. This year he had forgotten again. Mason kept his hands on the steering wheel, and his voice dropped slightly. I can go with you that afternoon. What about the morning? Grace already booked the photographer. Rescheduling would be a hassle. I looked out the window. Mason, do you know what my father asked me before he died? He asked when you were coming over for dinner. Mason said nothing. You never came, not even once. After a long silence, he said, there'll be another chance. I laughed. My father was gone. What other chance could there possibly be? It rained on the anniversary of my father's death. Mason left early that morning. I bought a bouquet and caught the first intercity bus back to my hometown alone. The cemetery sat halfway up a hill. Holding a black umbrella over my head, I stood in front of my father's grave. In the photograph, Dad looked just as he always had, smiling with fine lines at the corners of his eyes. I set the flowers down. Dad, I don't think I'm getting married after all. The wind blew cold rain against my face. I stood there for a long time before my phone finally rang. Where are you? Mason asked. I'm at the cemetery. Why didn't you wait for me? Was I supposed to wait until you finished Grace's photo shoot? He paused. Emily, don't do this. The photographer was already booked. Grace couldn't handle everything by herself if I didn't show up. But I'm supposed to handle the anniversary of my father's death by myself? He fell silent. A few seconds later he said, I'll come now. Don't bother. Emily, can you please stop? I stared at the photograph on the headstone. Mason, when my father died, you were out of town at the beach with Grace. Now on the 3rd anniversary of his death, you're off with her again for her beach photo shoot. Mason grew agitated. She was falling apart back then. I was afraid something might happen to her. And where did that leave me? You've always been strong. I had heard those words for 6 years. I was strong. I was independent. I did not need anyone beside me. Apparently, every time I was the one left behind, I was expected to deal with it on my own. After ending the call, I returned to the city, but I did not go back to the apartment. Instead, I went to the wedding planner's office and canceled the rest of the wedding arrangements. The wedding planner looked at me as if she wanted to say something but did not know how. Miss Carter, what about Mr. Reed? I'll tell him myself. But we've already finalized the entire visual concept for your wedding. She pulled up the design on her computer. Mason's name and mine appeared across the screen over a background of ocean waves. Grace's rewritten line was there too. Through every ebb and flow, I'm lucky to have you. I stared at the words and suddenly found them absurd. Who exactly was I supposed to feel lucky to have Grace? I pulled out my phone and sent Mason a text. Me. The wedding is off. He called almost immediately. I did not answer. He called 5 times in a row before I turned off my phone. By the time I returned to the apartment, it was already dark. I began packing. I did not own many clothes, but I had a lot of books. When I first moved in, Mason had said, "Your books take up too much space. Once we're married, don't keep buying so many." At the time I had smiled and agreed. Grace's surfboard, camping chairs, and photo props, however, were allowed to fill our entire storage closet. When I opened the door, I found her sun cat, rash guard, spare sandals, and even a luggage tag with her name on it. I had lived in that apartment for 4 years, yet it felt more like a stopover for Grace than my home. I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases. Then I slipped the engagement ring off my ring finger. Mason had bought it with points from a department store rewards program. He had said, "We'll be buying wedding bands later anyway. The engagement ring doesn't need to be a big deal." Back then I had agreed that it did not need to be. Now I realized that everything he had ever given me had been nothing more than the bare minimum needed to check a box. I placed the ring on the coffee table beside the seashell wind chime and left a note. "Mason, I canceled the wedding. I'm giving back the ring and the wind chime. You already have someone to go to the ocean with. It won't be me anymore." When I finished writing, I pulled my suitcases out of the apartment. The moment the door closed behind me, I turned my phone back on. Messages flooded the screen from Mason, Chloe, the wedding planner, and Mrs. Reed. The most recent one was from Mason. "Mason. Emily, where are you? Please don't scare me." I looked at it but did not reply. My rideshare was waiting downstairs. The driver asked, "Where are you headed?" I looked straight ahead with quiet, unwavering resolve. "Please take me to the airport." As the car approached the terminal, my phone lit up. Mason had sent me a photo of the ring and wind chime sitting on the coffee table. Mason. What is this supposed to mean? I turned off the screen. The meaning was obvious. He was the one who had never understood. I landed in Denver at 1 in the morning. Chloe called and immediately started yelling at me. "You really left? Emily, you went that far? You even quit your job." "I resigned." "Are you out of your mind? You spent 5 years working your way up at that company and finally made manager." I didn't want to stay there anymore. She was quiet for a moment. "Mason is losing it. He went to your office looking for you, and the front desk told him you had resigned. Then he rushed to the wedding planner's office and found out you'd canceled everything. He asked me where you went, but I didn't tell him." "Thank you." He didn't sound like himself, though. I gave a faint laugh. He just never thought I would actually leave. After ending the call, I dragged my suitcases into the apartment I had rented short-term. It was a small 1-bedroom apartment with clean white walls. The window overlooked an old street. There was no ocean here. There were no spare sandals belonging to Grace, no jacket Mason had tossed carelessly across the couch, and no wedding backdrop beating a line someone else had rewritten for me. After I showered, my phone rang again. The number was unfamiliar. I answered. "Emily Carter? This is Tyler Grant. What do you need?" "Mason's at my place." "I see." Tyler lowered his voice. "He's had a lot to drink. He keeps holding the note you left and staring at it." I said nothing. "He says he doesn't understand why you did all this out of nowhere." There it was again, the idea that everything had happened out of nowhere. Ending the engagement, quitting my job, and moving away had all happened out of nowhere in his eyes. But the 300 photographs had not appeared out of nowhere, nor had all the times he had let me down over those 6 years. His absence on the anniversary of my father's death had not been sudden either. Tyler sighed. "Emily, I know he hurt you, but Mason can be unbelievably oblivious." "Oblivious enough to take more than 300 pictures of Grace?" Tyler went silent. He went through the hard drive. My hand froze around the phone. He said he never realized every picture in that folder was of Grace. Of course he didn't notice. To him, taking all those pictures of her came naturally. "He went through your messages too. What did he find?" "He found 13 times you asked him to take you to the coast." I closed my eyes. It had not been 13. It had been 14. One of them had been a voice message, so he probably had not counted it. Tyler continued. "He keeps repeating the same thing." "What?" He said. "So she had been waiting for me every single time." I ended the call and stood by the window. A breeze moved through the Denver night, but it was not damp like the wind off the ocean. My phone lit up again. Mason. Emily, why didn't you tell me you were hurting this much? I stared at the message, exhausted. Hadn't I told him? I told him I wanted to see the ocean, and he said there was nothing worth seeing. I asked him to come with me on the anniversary of my father's death, and he said he was tied up with a project. I asked him to be involved in our wedding, and he told me to make the decisions myself. I told him Grace was crossing boundaries and he called me sensitive. He knew. He had simply never stopped long enough to listen. I stared at the screen. In the end, I sent only a few words. Me. I told you, but you never cared. On my third day in Denver, I went to a job interview. The recruiter asked why I had left my previous city. I wanted a fresh start. She glanced over my resume. Did you work in wedding planning before? No. I worked in brand events. That works out well. We're producing an outdoor lifestyle festival next month. Can you work overtime? Yes, I can. After leaving the office, I bought an iced Americano. More than a dozen unread messages from Mason were waiting on my phone. Mason. I went to the wedding venue. Mason. The ceremony backdrop is still up. Mason. They told me you created 7 versions of that backdrop. Mason. Emily, I had no idea. I stopped beside the road and watched the traffic stream pass. He had no idea. He never did because he never bothered to ask. The next message contained a photo of the white draped ceremony backdrop. Our names were still there, with a small note from the staff taped beneath them. Scheduled for removal. Mason sent several more messages. Mason. I found your handwritten wedding notes in the bridal suite. Mason. You wrote. I hope that when he walks through the door that day, he'll think I look beautiful. My eyes stung as I stared at the words. I had written them a long time ago. The day I tried on wedding dresses, Mason sat on the couch staring at his phone. When I came out in the third dress and eagerly asked whether I looked good, he did not even look up from texting Grace. They all looked the same. When I got home, I wrote that sentence in the margin of those notes, as though I were trying to reassure myself. On our wedding day, he would finally look at me. He would think I was beautiful. But that day would never come. Chloe called around noon. Mason went to your father's grave yesterday. I stopped walking. What did he go there for? He brought flowers and stood there for 2 hours. My father doesn't need anything from him. Chloe sighed, her voice dropping. He said it was the first time he realized you had to change buses twice to get from your family's home to the cemetery. You made that trip alone every year. I said nothing. He also went back over everything from the month your mother was in the hospital. What was he trying to find out? Didn't he tell you he was away on business and couldn't come back during the month before your mother died? My grip tightened around the phone. The year my mother died, Mason went to the coast with Grace. Grace had just gone through a breakup and said she needed to get away. Meanwhile, my mother had asked me from her hospital bed, "Is Mason busy? Why hasn't he come to see me?" I told her he was working. In reality, he was at the beach photographing the sunrise for Grace. Chloe spoke quietly. He finally pieced together that he was at the coast on the day your mother died. My throat closed. I had never wanted to reopen those old wounds. Every page of that history still hurt. That afternoon, Mason sent me a long message. Mason. I only found out today that you called me 3 times the day your mother died. Mason. All I said was, "We'll talk later." Mason. Then I went tide pooling with Grace. Mason. Emily, I don't even know how to apologize to you. I stared at the message for a long time before my fingers finally moved. Me. There's no point apologizing to my mother. She can't hear you. This time he did not reply immediately. I turned off my phone. Outside, a flower vendor was calling from the sidewalk below. Fresh lavender, $5 a bundle. I went downstairs and bought one. After placing it in a glass on the table, the apartment finally began to smell like it belonged to me. Grace messaged me on my first day at the new job. Grace. Emily, are you doing okay? I stared at the words for a long time before replying. Me? I'm fine. Her next message came almost immediately. Grace. Mason has been a mess these past few days. He boxed up everything I had at his place and sent it back. He even made me return the pearl clip. The point was not that Mason was a mess. The point was that she no longer had anywhere to keep her belongings. Me. That's between the two of you. Grace. Emily, did you get the wrong idea about us? Mason and I really are just friends. I laughed. Me. Do friends fill someone else's home with their belongings? The typing indicator stayed on for a long time before her reply came through. Grace. Mason and I grew up together. His home has always felt like mine. I never thought much of it. Me. Did you know he was with you at the beach on the day my mother died? This time she took even longer to respond. Grace. I was in a really bad place that day. Me. So my mother's death was supposed to take a back seat to your feelings. She sent a voice message, her voice choked with emotion. Grace. Emily, that's a cruel thing to say. I really wasn't coping back then. If Mason hadn't stayed with me, something might have happened to me. Me. Grace, where did that leave me? She did not answer. I kept typing. Me. On the anniversary of my father's death, he went to your photo shoot. Me. When my mother died, he went tide pooling with you. Me. For my wedding you changed the menu, rewrote the ceremony backdrop, and redesigned the bridal suite. Me. You wore the hair clip he bought you, sat in the passenger seat of his car, and spoke to him with the easy intimacy of someone far more than a friend. Me. And now you're telling me you never thought much of it. She finally replied. Grace. But Mason wanted to do all of that. My fingers went cold. More messages followed. Grace. Mason is with you because you make sense on paper. You can take care of yourself, organize the wedding, and keep your lives stable. Grace. With me he can relax. Grace. He laughs. He stays up all night to watch the ocean with me. He remembers what I like. Grace. You can't blame me just because he never gave you those things. I stared at the screen. Suddenly, Grace seemed more honest than Mason had ever been. She knew. She knew exactly what was happening. She knew Mason had given her his love and left me with all the responsibilities. That was why she had never been afraid of crossing the line. I stopped reading and blocked her. Chloe called that evening. Grace sent Mason your entire chat history. I was not surprised. What did he say? He read them and didn't speak for a long time. And then, he asked her, You knew Emily was hurting this entire time? I remained silent. Grace started crying and said she had only depended on him too much. What did Mason say? Just one thing. What? He said, Every time you depended on me, I left her alone in a hospital or at a cemetery. Chloe sighed. Emily, I think he finally understands. I sprinkled a little water over the lavender by the window. The pale blossoms were perfectly still. Understanding it now doesn't undo anything. You're really not going back? No, I'm not. Would you still refuse even if he cut Grace out of his life completely? I said, Chloe, I didn't lose to Grace. I lost to every version of myself he failed to choose over those 6 years. Mason found me in Denver 2 weeks later. I had just returned from the festival site, covered in dust, when the receptionist hurried over. Emily, someone's here to see you. I looked up. Mason stood at the entrance to the office. He had lost weight, and his face was covered in stubble. He held a paper bag in one hand. I walked over. How did you find me? I asked Chloe. She told you. I begged her for a long time. He held out the paper bag. This is for you. I did not take it. He opened the bag himself. Inside was the pair of pearl stud earrings I had wanted at the mall the year before. His voice was hoarse. Take a look. Do you still like them? I glanced at the earrings. Does buying them now change anything? His hand froze in midair. I know I'm too late. He looked down and pulled the pearl hair clip from his pocket. I got this back from Grace too. You gave it to her. He swallowed hard before speaking, his voice breaking. I never should have given it to her. There are a lot of things you never should have done. He nodded. I know. I looked at him. Do you know which one hurt me the most? His eyes reddened. It was the day your mother died. Pain tore through my chest. The day my mother died, I had been alone in her hospital room. A nurse asked me to sign the paperwork, but my hand shook so badly that I could barely write my name. Called Mason. He did not answer the first time. He did not answer the second time. On the third call, he finally picked up, sounding impatient. I'm in the middle of something. We'll talk later. Only afterward did I learn that he had been taking pictures of Grace at the beach. In one photo, she stood with her back to the rising sun and both arms lifted above her head. The note saved with the photo read, "She finally smiled." When my mother closed her eyes for the last time, I did not cry out. The room was so quiet that I was afraid even my sobs would disturb her. Now Mason stood in front of me with tears running down his face. "Emily, I didn't know your mother had already." I cut him off. "I told you she was in really bad shape. I thought. You thought I could handle it." His face went white. "Mason, it isn't that you didn't know I was hurting. You just thought the pain wouldn't kill me." He covered his face. "Please stop." "Why should I stop? Isn't it true?" His voice came out raw. "I was wrong." "Of course you were." I looked at the earrings in his hand. "But my mother isn't coming back. Neither is my father. The wedding is canceled. I quit my job and I left. And now you're standing here telling me you were wrong. What good does that do?" I walked past him and stepped into the elevator. Before the doors closed, I said one last thing to him. "Don't come looking for me again." He called after me, desperate to stop me. "Emily, what if I take you to see the ocean now?" I stopped and looked back at him. "Mason, I don't want to see it anymore." "Why?" "Because when I think of that ocean, I don't see a beautiful view." I said each word slowly and clearly. "I see the 6 years you spent loving her." His hand slowly dropped to his side. The earrings slipped from the paper bag and hit the floor. "I don't want a consolation prize after you spent 6 years choosing someone else." Mason stayed outside my office building all night and did not leave until nearly dawn. The next morning I was eating oatmeal when the building security guard told me, "Emily, that man didn't leave until 4 in the morning." He sat on the steps staring at his phone the entire time. I nodded but did not go downstairs. At 10 that morning, Mason sent me 2 messages. "Mason, I won't bother you at work again. Mason, but if you ever need me, I'll be there." I read them and deleted the conversation. Love that came too late wasn't worth a damn. That evening, I picked up some groceries at the corner market near my building. When I turned onto my street, I saw Mason standing beneath a streetlight. He did not approach me. He only watched from a distance. I walked past him with my groceries inside. "Stop coming here." He swallowed hard before speaking. "I signed the written agreement ending our engagement." I said nothing. "I ended the lease on the apartment too. I packed everything you left there and I'll ship it to you. I also cut Grace out of my life. Did she agree to that?" "Whether she agrees doesn't matter anymore." I looked up at him. "Mason, are you doing all this because you love me? Or because you're afraid of losing me?" The color drained from his face. "You don't have to answer right away," I said. "I don't want to know anymore." His voice trembled. "Emily, I really did love you." I gave him a faint smile. "Then let's say you did. But the way you loved me hurt too much." The streetlight stretched his shadow across the pavement. He lowered his voice. "If someone ever loves you, I hope he's nothing like me." I kept walking. "He won't be. Because I'll never choose someone like you again." The package arrived on a bright sunny day. When I opened the box, the written agreement ending our engagement was on top. Mason had already signed it, his signature dark and heavy on the page. Beneath it were my wedding planning notes, each page carefully slipped into a clear protective sleeve. A note had been tucked beside them. "You poured your heart into these. I have no right to throw them away." Underneath the notes were the engagement ring and the seashell wind chime. Mason had tried to glue the crack, but it was still visible. Another note read, "The ring was an afterthought. So was the wind chime. Everything I ever gave you was too little." At the very bottom was a small box. When I opened it, there were no pearls inside. Instead, I found a little Denver skyline magnet, the kind sold in any tourist gift shop. The receipt was still stuck to the back. $4.99. The accompanying note said, "I bought this at the airport the day I came to Denver. For once, I chose something without asking Grace, and it wasn't something I picked up as an afterthought. But I know you won't want it. So I just sent it along with everything else. My phone rang. It was Chloe. Did you get the package? Yes. Mason moved out today. He ended the lease on the old apartment. Grace went looking for him and cried outside his building for a long time. I set the Denver skyline magnet on the table. Chloe asked, Emily, does it still hurt? I looked out the window. The sun was shining over Denver. An ice cream vendor pushed a cart down the block, while the kids next door headed noisily off to school with backpacks on their shoulders. Life was loud. It was also real. Sometimes, I said. Are you ever going back? No. After the call, I signed the agreement, took a photo and sent it to Mason. He replied almost immediately. Mason. Got it. A few seconds later, another message appeared. Mason. Make sure you eat regular meals from now on and don't drink iced coffee all the time. Looked at the words and almost laughed. He had finally remembered that I had a sensitive stomach. But I no longer needed him to remind me. That evening, I bought a bundle of lavender. On my way home, I passed a home renovation showroom and stopped to look at the window display. It featured photos of model interiors, a small balcony, a natural wood table and sheer white curtains. Suddenly, I wanted to redecorate my apartment. It would not be a home built around a marriage or a bridal suite prepared with someone else in mind. It would be my own home. When I returned to the apartment, I placed the lavender in a vase and put the Denver skyline magnet on the refrigerator. I did not hang the seashell wind chime or put up anything connected to the ocean. That ocean could belong to Mason and Grace. I did not want it anymore. When I opened the window, the evening breeze drifted inside. There was no damp, salty smell, only the sweet scent of cinnamon rolls drifting up from the bakery downstairs. I sat by the window and placed my wedding planning notes into a drawer, one page at a time. The final page read, I hope that when he walks through the door that day, he'll think I look beautiful. I stared at it for a long time. Then I crossed out the word he and wrote a new sentence. I hope that every morning when I wake up, I'll feel good about who I am. When my pen finally stopped moving, night had fallen. Countless windows glowed in the distance. Not one of those lights had been left on for me by Mason. That was all right. I switched on my own light, and the room brightened at once. I'm done waiting, I told myself. This time I meant it.
This is Listening Novel. We appreciate you spending your time with us. If you enjoyed today's story, please like and subscribe for more stories, and stay tuned for what's next.